may look good in the eyes of others, and yet internally we suffer shame because we know that we're not being ourselves. When we say, how do we know? Well, that for many of us is an internal knowledge that arises. Now, why? Because that essential self hasn't gone away and is calling to us. And we don't feel right when we betray it or when we're not out of contact with it. Now, that doesn't happen for many people. That doesn't happen for everybody. For some people, then, it takes some catastrophe. So what I'm saying is that at some point or another, if you're not in touch with that inner voice, if you don't hear it, the body will speak to you loud and clear. You're going to get something happen to you. And sometimes that'll happen in the form of illness or symptoms. And then the body's talking to you. The body's saying no when you're not saying no. If the voice doesn't speak to you directly, or if it speaks to you, you don't listen, your body at some point is going to kick in. Or you're going to get depressed, or anxious, or something else. Or something will happen in your personal relationships. And at that point you can say, well, I'm not with the right partner. Screw them, it's all their fault. Which many of us say. Or for some people it becomes the opening of a door where we begin to look, okay, what in here wasn't authentic? What in here wasn't genuine? How did I create this situation? How do I keep creating these situations over and over again? Am I just a victim of bad luck? Or is there some pattern here? In other words, something happens, some difficulty happens to shake you out of your complacent belief that things are just fine the way they are. And as the California-based great teacher A.H. Alma says, that the most difficult things that happen to us are also the most compassionate things, because basically they're ways of a part of it, how he puts it, a part of us that loves us more than anything else, puts these roadblocks in our way, saying, that's not the way, that's not the way, that's not the way, you better know about that, you know. So there's roadblocks in the way to bring us to ourselves, you know. And so we can look upon our difficulties as problems to get rid of, or we can look at them as teachings to bring us back to ourselves. Once you reconnect with your authentic self, a lot of medical conditions can abate and even remit completely. I'm not promising that. I'm just saying I've seen it too often, and there's too many examples also written up in the literature. So that, yeah, healing is always possible. But out of 100 women with breast cancer, only 7 carry the gene. 93 do not. Out of 100 women with the gene, not all of them will get the disease. No, they're much higher risk, no question about it. It just means that, for the most part, genes don't determine illnesses. What then does? And by the way, this is true for whether you're talking about most physical illnesses and mental illnesses. So to talk about genetics is kind of a lazy person's way of trying to explain something, because scientifically, there's very little basis to it. So, for example, all these genetically determined mental health conditions, they say about ADHD, which is something I've written about after my own diagnosis in my 50s, that is the most heritable mental illness there is. Well, as I say in this book, to say that ADHD is the most heritable mental illness is like saying that quartz is the most chewable crystal, because it's not true. It's neither a disease nor is it genetic. Nobody's ever found a single gene that determines any mental health condition. Nobody's ever found a group of genes that determine any mental health condition. Nobody has ever found a group of genes that if you don't have them, you will not have a certain mental health conditions. There are a large group of genes that the more of them you have, the more you risk, and more at risk you are for any number of mental health conditions, but no specific ones. Which means that the genes cannot cause the disease, because if they did, when they showed up, so should the disease in every case, but it doesn't. And you're going to have the same disease, or if you want to call it that, even without the genes. Because the fact is, scientifically speaking, that genes are turned on and off by the environment. So it's a question of what kind of environment is acting on certain genes that will promote one kind of development or a less healthy kind of development. And so that loss of authenticity, for reasons I will not go into explaining now, but maybe you'll intuit to a significant degree, and you'll certainly get that information in this book and my other books, is that loss of authenticity is a significant cause of illness and distress, physical and mental. Is that loss of authenticity is a significant cause of illness and distress, physical and mental. And I love quoting Hungarian doctors for some reason, I don't know why. And Dr. János Johannes Selye, S-E-L-Y-E, who was the preeminent researcher of stress. In fact, he coined the word stress in the way that we use it today. And he's the one that showed in the laboratory how stressing animals will have physiological impacts on their immune system, on their hormonal apparatus, on their intestines. And Selye was not only a brilliant physician, he was also a brilliant researcher. He was also a humanist, and he wrote in his book on stress, he said that most of our tensions and frustrations come from compulsive needs to act the role of someone that we're not. So inauthenticity is our biggest source of stress, he pointed out. But that inauthenticity, he may not have realized, wasn't our fault, it wasn't kind of a mistake, it wasn't a moral failure, it was an adaptive response to our early environment. So the question then becomes not to judge ourselves for being inauthentic, not to judge ourselves from being disconnected from ourselves, but to understand that actually those were normal responses to an abnormal environment. But if we want to become healthy, guess what? The word health originates in the word for wholeness. So if trauma is the disconnection from themselves, then health is the reconnection, which is entirely possible, entirely available for us, because that capacity for healing is simply in our nature as organisms. So, and there's a part of us that can never be destroyed. It can be obscured. We can lose connection with it. I certainly have for long periods of my life. But it's always there, as long as there's consciousness, this capacity for healing, for rejoining our disconnected parts, and to become whole and to heal. That's just with us all our lives. And so that I don't have a negative message for you. And the message I have is that healing, trauma, daunting and damaging as it can be, both on a social and certainly on an individual level, it can also be healed. Because trauma is not what happened to you, but what happened inside you as a result. And if you're still carrying the imprints and residues of what happened to you, that can be healed. If I got the message that I wasn't worthy and important just for existing, that I had to prove my worth to the world, and that created certain behaviors and on my part, I can actually come to the conclusion it was never true. It was never true that I wasn't worth it. It was never true that you were not worth it. It was never true. It was simply a conclusion you came to as a result of what happened to you. And if you stop trying to prove to the world by being a hard worker or being extraordinarily pleasant or being focusing on your looks all the time or focusing on your successes and achievements, but just dare to show up as the vulnerable creature that we all are and reconnected with your true vulnerable self, which at the time adaptively was too painful for you to experience, but you're no longer that helpless child. Well, then that just means that healing is possible to you.